This is the Rugby Ascendant podcast with Envia Velman and Chris Wyatt.
It's the Rugby Ascendant podcast. It's time to chat to our friend Chris Wyatt again somewhere in America. I'm not sure where. And we're going to talk about the Springboks, the squad announcement, some Currie Cup and the likes. Welcome back, Chris.
Well, thanks a lot, MV. Yeah, in an undisclosed location, somewhere under the brick and steel of an undisclosed location. No, I'm in central Pennsylvania, a place that is being peppered by political visitors right now. We've got an election campaign, and every time I turn around, somebody's just down the road blocking all the traffic, blocking the road. So trying to avoid that.
Stay at home, watch rugby, avoid the politics.
Yeah, but it's only on the weekends. It only helps me on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, not the rest of the week.
Well, we can chat about rugby in the meantime, like we do now. It saves you from facing the traffic and the likes. I wanted to talk to you about the two things about the Springboks. Firstly, the game against Australia, the two games maybe, and what you think we learned from that. And secondly, the squad that's just been announced and a couple of raised eyebrows there. So let's start with the first one. The game against the Wallabies, the second one in Perth, or Perthfontein, as it's been referred to. Just your general thoughts on that. How did the Springboks do? Did they manage to learn anything, or were the conditions too bad to really be able to cast an eye on it and learn something from it?
I think the conditions really were a problem, but the All Blacks managed the same conditions just across the pond in brilliant fashion. So I think that we can say that conditions played a role, but they need to step up and play better. I don't know, maybe a practice in a rainstorm or people pelting you with fire hoses or something. But I mean, if the All Blacks can play that well, then the Springboks can certainly play better. There's a lot of commentary this week talking about the Springboks, about whether they are just papering over cracks in a lineup. But I have to say this, those who criticize the Springboks have to remember that this was a massive lineup change. This was in many ways an experiment that we saw out there. A lot of young players getting a chance. And the weather definitely played a role. But I would say this, I'm always a harsh critic, and I'm harshest critic of myself, but I'm just a pretty harsh critic of Bucks at times too. There are a lot of points left in the 22. The Springboks made a lot of mistakes they shouldn't have made. There's some pretty dumb mistakes made too. But I would say all in all, pretty happy with the result in such terrible conditions. And the Wallabies really ought to be concerned about their performance. I had the Australian broadcast, which was coming across this side, and they tried. It was like putting lipstick on a pig. They kept talking about, well, this is a good team. It's doing really well. They weren't even in the game. They didn't score a try. They never threatened. Their offense lacks any style, any flair, anything. It's obvious what they're going to do. You and I could, move people around on the pitch to be in the right place to make the tackle, because there's nothing to that offense. Maybe the Wallabies will come along, and they're definitely better than they were at the World Cup at this stage, but they still have a long way to go. In fact, right now, I think they're the worst team in the Rugby Championship. The Pumas are better than them. And I think that's a pretty fair statement. Now, the question for the Springboks coming up against New Zealand, will we play a serious team, or are we going to experiment? I doubt we're going to experiment, because we're hungry. 15 years in a row, the All Blacks have given a shellacking here, and they've walked away with the silverware. We need to defeat them at Ellis Park next week. That's the bottom line. And I think they can do it, but it depends on selection and then who's on the bench and how we play it. We're going to play the role of the bomb squad, or are we going to piecemeal players in? That's a good question. But I think that this game against the Wallabies in Perth was ugly. We won big, but it was ugly. It wasn't a pretty game. And we could have easily had a 59-0 victory there, even in those conditions. And I think that the Bucks coaches need to take note of that and pay attention to the dumb mistakes that were made, the poor discipline and the sloppy passes, among other things.
Talking about what could have been, what definitely could have been, is we could have scrummed more. Second half, no scrums whatsoever. That sort of took the sting out of our attack a lot. But on the other hand, it gave us an opportunity to play more Tony ball. Play the way Tony Brown wants us to, not worry about getting tied up in scrums and the likes. Get the ball and start running, and that seemed to be working quite well, didn't it?
Well, I agree. There are a number of people who are bemoaning the fact that there were uncontested scrums pretty much the entire second half. But I mean, look, it's like sevens. Those aren't real scrums. Get over it. It's look. I realize the scrum is important to the Springboks, but you got to have more than one dimension to your game, and they do. I'm just saying that you can't rely on a single aspect of the game. And I agree with you that it gave an opportunity to open things up and make people run. But people love the scrum because it sucks all the players in. They get an open field. But I think that in the end, we didn't suffer from the because look at the scrums. We weren't being rewarded for scrum penalties early on. We were not. We're not getting. I mean, every time we were blowing them up, and we weren't getting the penalties. They were getting the ball out of there too quickly, letting it go, letting the scrum collapse. I think that once again, a few officiating issues, but we won't go into that today. But I think that I think it was fine that the uncontested scrums took place, and we managed to do, I thought, pretty well. And I think it's a non-story. People just made a big deal about it because they're in love with the scrum. I like a good scrum, but I like an all-round game as well.
The obvious question is, it seemed mighty convenient that Aussies suddenly went to uncontested scrums just when Oxenchair and the likes came onto the field, don't you think?
Well, I tell you, it was interesting. Unfortunate the injury that occurred and forced them into uncontested scrums. I mean, I would like to see the physician's report on that.
Yeah, right. No, for me, in terms of the first half, we want to talk about specific players. Jan-Hendrik Wessels was the biggest question mark for me. He's a hooker at the Bulls. He was a prop and a lock in his school days, surprisingly enough, but now he's a bit short for a lock. Jake decided to make him a hooker from prop, and then Rassie decided to make him to a prop from a hooker. So between the two of them, they're going to have to figure out where he fits in. The question is, or the fact of the matter is, I think he had Alan Alatua's number in the scrums. And that is courtesy of the fact that he was practicing against the likes of Frans Malherbe and those kind of players, proper strong scrummages, and under the guidance of old Buckethead, Don Niemann himself. So I think in terms of Jan-Hendrik Wessels, in terms of his scrumming, he definitely passed it. But what impressed me most was that try that he made when Fassie scored, and when Fassie actually scored the try, who was right next to him? Jan-Hendrik Wessels. That guy is as fast as lightning, considering he's a prop, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I'd have to say the same thing. I think his performance was underrated by most of the analysts who gave scores in this contest. I thought that he was actually brilliant. And yeah, he had Alan Alatoa's number. The captain of the Wallabies was at 6s and 7s. He didn't know what to do with himself there. He was really pushed back badly. And yeah, I agree. Jan-Hendrik Wessels. But look, I like a guy who's flexible like that, can play more than one position. You know how I feel about Sasha Feinberg-Ngumzula. That guy can play pretty much all over the pitch. It's good to see the guys in the front row who can make that transition from hooker to prop and back. Not a lot of guys have that ability. So if he's one of them, that's crucial. Matt, picture this. We find ourselves in the next World Cup in Australia, and we're in the semifinal, and we have no hookers left. And Deon Fourie is retired, so we can't rely on Deon Fourie.
Yeah.
So we need something. But Jan-Hendrik Wessels is available. He's in there as a prop. We switch him back to hooker, and we do just fine. Because God knows we don't want to put Dwayne in there.
No, he's not going to chance. We'll talk about the squad just now, and it's quite clear where Rassie's moving towards, what Rassie's moving towards with Jan-Hendrik. But we'll get to that in a moment. The one player that disappointed me a little bit, and I'm a Bull supporter myself, is Johan Grobbelaar. He did not seem to be able to take that next step up. I've been reprimanded a little bit by some of the South African fans saying, listen, give the guy a chance. Remember Malcolm Mark 6 years ago couldn't throw in the ball to save his life, which is true. The guy learned to become what he is today through experience. So don't write off Johan Grobbelaar just yet. But interesting enough, he's not in the Springbok squad that was selected for the All Blacks test. So yeah, your thoughts on Grobbelaar?
Sure. The fact that people are flaming you, sit down, be quiet, relax, take a breath. If you don't criticize his performance in this game, then you're not an honest supporter, not an honest spectator, not an honest fan. Whatever the reason for Johan Grobbelaar's performance, it was atrocious. It wasn't bad, it was atrocious. I would rate him a 2 out of 10 on his performance in the game. And I was high, and I'm still high on him, even though I'm not a Bulls fan. Look, it was terrible. The lineouts weren't the only problem. He was terrible tackling. He was terrible with the ball. He just was in the wrong place too many times, doing the wrong things all day long. Maybe the occasion was too big for him. Maybe the weather played a role in it. I don't know. But the bottom line is his performance was atrocious. And if you want to flame me for that, fine. That just tells me you're not a serious fan. Anybody that's attacked you for that needs to calm down, because we're here to talk about the game and talk about performances, what can be and what has been. You know, we want to be unburdened by what has been. I'm sorry, where did I get that from? No. Americans will get that reference. But seriously, his performance was very poor, and I'm not at all surprised that he's dropped back out. He'll be back up. He's a talented player, and he'll get there. I don't know what the problem was that day, but that he should have come out long before he did. I could not believe he was still in the game at halftime. I was shaking my head. He should have been gone the first 20 minutes. That's the change that should have been done very quickly.
Yeah, I suspect we're going to see him in the Argentina tests. That's by thinking they're not going to just let him go. They've tested him, came up a bit short, but they're not going to let him go. He's too talented to play. He's a good player, make no mistake. But he seems to be suffering in terms of the BMT stakes, if you ask me. And that's something that you can learn. That's something that you can be taught in no better environment to learn it than in the Springbok environment. Next guy I want to talk to you about is Ruan Orkia, old diesel engine. You and I joked about it last time we were at Loftus together, remember? And the poor guy slinked in there after the loss against the Glasgow Warriors, and we both felt so sorry for him. But that guy's got a heart like anything. He's got guts, he's got determination, and I think he played quite well. To me, he was one of the standout players of the game. Your thoughts?
No, I thought Ron did a fair job in the game, better than fair, but I was very confused. I kept saying Lut de Jager. I mean, where'd that beard come from? He looks like Lut de Jager out there. It threw me off. Actually, I thought he was out for the season until next year. Didn't he get it on like a muscle transplant like Peter Steph or something like that? But I don't know. But seriously, the beard kind of threw me off. I wasn't expecting that. But no, seriously, his performance in the game, I thought it was better than average. It was good. He did a fine job. He acquitted himself well. I'll say that. Look, I mean, it was difficult conditions for anybody out there in the pitch. I mean, I've played rugby in the rain. It is hard to catch the ball when it's slick like that. It's like a greased pig. It is difficult, but I thought he did fine. Yeah, I'd agree. But there is one player that had a very poor game, and I'm not surprised to see him go back down. But he only came up for this game to get some more blooding as a Springbok, and that's Morné van den Berg. He did a poor job, I thought, at scrum half, and maybe that was the weather for him, but it was really tough. His kicks were terrible, and for the most part, and he didn't distribute the ball very well. I don't look. I like Morné. I think he's a good player. I'm glad to see him call back up, but this was a poor performance from him as well.
Yeah, you see, it's not Ellis Park this. Number one, it's not hot, it's not dry, it's not warm. So completely foreign and alien conditions for him. So, and he didn't make the step up, but let's make no mistake. And he's the other player that was dropped from the Springbok squad for the All Blacks coming up. So we'll talk about that just now. Yeah, I must be
MV, but to be fair, I expected both Grobelaar and Morné van den Berg not to make the All. Even if they had stellar performances, I didn't expect them to make this squad. This was, as I said, an experimental team that was put on the field in Perth, Fontaine.
Perth, Elizabeth. Okay. Yeah, no, I agree with you. Okay, let's talk about Elrich Louw. That seems to be the buzzing point or the big discussion point at the moment. Jasper Wiese is back in the group. His suspension is over at last. I mean, it felt like ages. So the question is, do you think he made the step up, or do you think Wiese will just slot right back in?
Well, he certainly made the step up, and that's going to be the $64,000 question. Will Rossi go with the hot player or go with this gold standard that's been there before, the guy that replaced Vermeulen? So it's a tough question, a tough call. I suspect Jasper Wiese will come off the bench in this game because he's rusty. It depends how the practices go. We've got 2 weeks. So if the practices go really well and he's performing well in the practices and he looks up to the task, then Rossi may start him. But the smart money, in my view, is to go with Elrich Louw and use Jasper as a bomb squad replacement in the second half. That's what I think is the smart money.
That's interesting. It's a very interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I like that. All right, the next guy that he's been put on a pedestal and his praise is sung to our heavens. This game wasn't one of his best, and that is Sasha. I almost said a different name there, Sasha Feinberg in Ngomezulu. But he still played well. He's got a head on his shoulders. He stayed calm. Made quite a few mistakes. Again, I think largely attributable to conditions, maybe. But it's definitely not the guy they're going to, I don't think, pick in a starting squad for the All Black tests.
No, I see Pollard starting at fly half for this test against the All Blacks in South Africa. But Sasha, again, he did what he had to do to prove that he's worthy of being up there. And he stayed in the lineup of teams, and whether he gets the nod off the bench or not, we'll see. But remember, he's not just a fly half. He's a center. He's a wing. He's a fullback, especially. I think the argument now is what's he best at, fullback or fly half? And that's a legitimate argument. Now, this game here in Perth didn't prove that argument, but I think the previous game in Brisbane, it proved that that's the question going forward. So Sasha could very well find himself on the bench as a utility player to come out and fill any of those roles in case somebody gets injured in the second half. But yeah, I see Pollard starting against the All Blacks. He has the history. He's proven. He's got the nerve. He's got the calm. And I think that that's where they'll go. That's who I would start. I would start Pollard in the first game in Joburg at Ellis Park.
Do you think worked at 12 inside center?
Yeah, that works. Yeah, that'll work. That'll work. That's fine.
Were you impressed with his performance at 12 this weekend?
I didn't even know he was in the game for most of the game.
No, that's the point.
Yeah. No, but Lucanio comes up in the most unusual moments and just is lights out. He's an odd player. I mean, arguably he was the best player at his position in the world for a couple of years there. But this year, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, Lucanio, I don't think he's passed it yet, but his performance so far this season hasn't been where it has been the past couple of years.
To me, he's not a 12. He's definitely a 13. I know he started his career at 12, but he's moved to 13. And it's just the way it is. He's now behind Jesse Kriel in the queue. He's not the best player in the world anymore. At 13, it's Jesse Kriel's now the best player in the world, I think, at 13. I don't think we'll ever see Lucanio in his prime like we used to. I think that knee injury might be a little more. It slowed him down a bit. I think he lost a bit of his touch, a bit of his magic there, if you ask me. Right.
Well, I agree. Not just his speed, but also his moves. You know how Cheslin Colby and Currie Cup can dance from side to side on the fly as they're going forward. They can dance. That's a rare skill. You don't see a lot of great players who have speed and the ability to dance is not the best term, but you get it. Juke and jive one way. Take those side steps and do that at almost full speed. Cheslin is magic at that. Kirtley's pretty darn good at it, and Lucanio was brilliant at it. But I see some slowdown in that. He doesn't have that anymore. And that can be the difference between breaking free, getting a line break, and running down and getting a try or not. And I think that's maybe where we are. And I agree. Jesse is the best in the world at that position right now, hands down.
Right, and then Fassie. The big question. Fassie is extremely fast. I mean, that guy is as fast as lightning. Yes, I tried that he scored with that amazing little grubber that Mapimpi put through. That was quite an interesting one. But the question I have to ask is, does he have the kind of rugby brain that a Damien Willemse or a Willie Leroux has at the back as a fullback, a thinking fullback, orchestrating things and the likes, or is he just simply a runner and a kicker, more than not enough of a brainy kind of player?
He doesn't have the rugby knowledge and application of knowledge that Willie and Damien Willemse have. That's obvious to me. He is a lightning fast player. And that was Mapimpi's kick. Nas Bota's got to love that kick. He's got to love that. I mean, it's almost like he guided it with supernatural powers because it's boom, 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 boom. And then like 3 meters before the try line, it just pops right up into his chest and he goes across. But I mean, he had the pace, but Mapimpi's kick, the two of them, that was just brilliant. It just shows you once again, Makazole Mapimpi's value. He's still got it. No, Fassie is not that player, but he's a credible player off the bench. And he's a credible starter when you don't have the players available like Willemse or Willie Leroux. So, yeah, I mean, he's fine. Other players on the pitch can make up for that. I mean, but he's not the guy, but he's a good player.
In terms of Mapimpi, I was just thinking about that. That try that he didn't score, that's typical old school Mapimpi, puts a ball under the wrong arm, firstly, and then goes for the corner. Whereas a Cheslin or a Kirtley or somebody like that would have just stepped, or Edwulf van der Merwe would have just stepped past the guy and scored the try anyway. It's quite clear to me that that's why he's not in the starting lineup anymore. It's not the number one choice at wing anymore. He's still a brilliant player, but not necessarily the best anymore.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of problems, and you've identified one of them, well, both of them actually, with that non-try. Number one, if it had been Cheslin Colby or Edwulf van der Merwe or Currie Cup, they would have put the brakes on and did a juke to the inside. And if it didn't work, they would have cut back and continued down the sidelines. Number two, you don't carry the ball in the arm where you're going to be tackled. You should have changed. I mean, that was, look, it's a rookie mistake that shouldn't be made by someone that experienced and a 2-time World Cup winner. Makazole Mapimpi, for some reason, likes to run straight. He loves to run straight. And I guess he thinks he can outrun everybody. But you've got to remember, you're running straight at a long distance, and someone's coming at you at an angle here. Do it like this. At an angle, he has less distance to cover, and he's coming with force. And that was a absolutely brilliant try-saving tackle. You cannot argue otherwise. But Mapimpi, he facilitated. He enabled that tackle by not making any adjustment to his path to the try line and carrying the ball in the wrong arm. Simple as that. So yeah.
He doesn't have the speed anymore that he used to. I think he must still get used to that. I think that's probably what's catching him out.
I think he thinks he still has the speed. Look, I know I don't have the speed I once had. That's 15 years gone, and my real speed is 20 years gone. So, but I'm cognizant of that.
That's the thing. All right, just briefly about the Springbok squad. Like I said, the two surprises, I wouldn't say surprises. Neither of us were surprised, is the fact that Morne van der Berg and Johan Grobler were not selected again for the squad. What was noticeable here is the fact that they called up Nicholas Janse van Rensburg from Montpellier to fill in the lockstocks. And the question that I want to ask, the one that pops into my head immediately, what about a guy like Ruben van Heerden, for example, at the Stormers? I thought he was in the inside lane to be picked as a Bok this year, and Rowan Nortje got the nod ahead of him, but what about the local guys? Why bring a guy from France? Doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't even in the warm-up camps and the likes before the Wales test and that.
Well, a couple of things. Number one, I have no issue with South Africans abroad playing for the Springboks. I hated the idiotic 30 cap rule that was in place for a while. I thought that was unfair. I mean, that's very, very unfair to players. People have to recognize that in sport, professionally, you have a limited window to make money. You have a limited opportunity to make money. And let's be honest, Springbok players or South Africans playing in South Africa aren't making real money. The real money is in the French league. It's in the Premier League in England. That's where people have to go. Maybe it'll get better in URC. We'll see. But until the stadiums are full of 30, 40,000 people and big television contracts, we're not going to see that money flow. But the money flows in France. The money flows in Japan. The money flows in England. I do not fault any South African for going abroad to earn their craft. They have to make a living. Presumably, many of these players get married. They've got families to support. They also may have to deal with lifelong, niggles and injuries that, they have to see doctors all the time for, and there's nobody there taking care of. There's no physio to take care of them when they're 38 and they need to see the doc. So I have no problem with that. And I think it's asinine for Saru to limit players. So, okay, that's the first thing. So, but the second thing is, yes, I'm a little miffed that we didn't get a call up from the Stormers. That's a player who has certainly shown the mettle and I thought was in line to get there. Maybe it'll be coming soon. We don't know. Nicholas Janse van Rensburg, the thing there is that's a bit of a surprise. I mean, where did that come from? Does Rossi have some sort of relationship with him? Or does one of the coaches have a special relationship that maybe they do? I don't know. But it was to me also a surprise call up to see Nicholas Janse van Rensburg. But it's a cool name, Nicholas Janse van Rensburg. I always like those Janse van Rensburgs. They can never tell me where the Janse comes from. I've always asked.
No, I don't know either. Now, the thing is, he played in 2022 one game. I think it was against Wales.
Yeah.
What I understand is the fact that he can play both 5 and 7. That's probably the reason why he was picked ahead of a guy like Ruben van Heerden. They want him to be more versatile. And the fact that he was in the Springbok group from a year or two ago, it's not like he needed to be there this year. Whereas Ruben van Heerden has not been into anything as far as I'm aware.
No, that's a fair point. That's probably why they called him up. And look, I learned some time ago to rarely question Rossi's selections.
No, it's true, absolutely. But I still wonder why. There you go.
Yeah, we can wonder, we can speculate and shake our head, but most of the time he makes the right call.
Yeah, of course he does. He knows things that we can only dream of. We don't have any of that information that he does. Other players that are returning are Stephen Kitshoff, that he played against Lions this weekend in the Currie Cup match. We'll talk about that just now. And then Caden Moody is back. He had an exceptional. Did you see that backflip pass he made in the Pumas game to Devin Williams? What in the game? We'll talk about that just now. And who's the third player that came back from injury? Jasper Wiese is back from suspension. So that's an interesting one. A nice squad. I think the squad is going to be up against an All Black team that seems to have found its mojo. But again, after that second game, against Argentina.
I think all three of those additions will strengthen the Springboks at a time that they need to get a little bit stronger because it's the All Blacks. And you can never take your foot off the pump. You got to put your foot on the pedal and hold it down until the final whistle. The hooter goes off. But when the ref blows his whistle, then it's over. Never give the All Blacks any oxygen. I don't care if you're running them up 60-0. Don't feel sorry for them. Run the score up to 100 because those guys will come back from a deficit you can't imagine. They never say die. The All Blacks, no matter who's on the pitch, no matter how sorry their team is, they never say die. So we have got to have the best players and we've got to take it seriously. And we cannot go, oh, okay, well, it's just a turnover. No, put him on the bench. He screwed up. Get a better player out there.
Other players returning from injury is Jaden Hendrikse from the Sharks. He's out 4 months. He played a couple of games for the Sharks in the Currie Cup now. There's only 3 scrum halves in the group. It's Reinach, Hendrikse, and Grant Williams. So I'm wondering what Rossi's plans are there.
That's a good question. Faf is out with an injury for those who don't know, and I don't know when he's coming back. Something with his thigh. I'm not sure what happened there. But I'm not a fan of Jaden Hendrikse. I've never have been. I like his brother, Jordan. I think he's a good player. Fun to watch. but I've never been a fan of Jade Hendrickson. I think he's not the best player on this squad. Kobus and Grant Williams, to me, those are the two best scrum halves we have in South Africa right now, and I'm good with them being there. But yeah, just three. But we'll get by with that. It'll be fine. I mean, Jaden's credible. He's just not great.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of his either. But yeah, I'm going to probably get crucified to that as well now.
Oh well. But those will be Shark fans. Like anybody listens to them.
No, we've got a few of those. We've got a few of those. Briefly, before we talk about the Currie Cup, let's just talk about Scott Matthie. You told me about the MLR, Major League Rugby. He was the coach for the New England Free Jacks. They won back-to-back titles this year, if I'm not mistaken, 22, 23, and 24. He's now signed up to go be the attack and backs coach for the Edinburgh. For Edinburgh under Sean Everett. Both of them ex-South Africans, or South Africans, not ex-South Africans. That's an interesting development. I didn't see that coming.
Well, Edinburgh seems to love South Africans. They got plenty of them there. Pierre Schoeman will start there. It goes on. So, it makes sense. I think it's a smart move. Edinburgh's an interesting place to be, and they looked really good this year in the URC, especially as the season progressed. So, yeah, I think it's a smart move. Go from champion to champion. Pretty good.
It's interesting. You're the head coach and the team that won the competition 2 years in a row, and you go be a deputy coach, let's call it that, at another team. Do you think it's a step down, or do you think it's maybe a bit of a longer move?
Well, I mean, we did all have questions a year ago when a Springbok World Cup winning coach, whom often many people claim really wasn't the coach because it was a guy upstairs that was coaching, leaves and goes to Leinster. So as an assistant coach, I mean, so just saying.
Well, he went for family reasons, supposedly, Well, anyway, that's a long story. Okay, Chris, enough about the Springboks. And before I move on from the Springboks, I didn't ask you about your jersey, what you're wearing this week.
Yeah, no, this is one of my older Springbok jerseys. This is the one that doesn't have the separate Protea logo on one side and the Springbok on the other. It does have the Protea above the Springbok. That was a brief period. You remember this very famous jersey you'd see Victor Matfield wearing all the time back in the day. And anyway, so this is I pulled this one out of the closet. Got a little flame last week on our channel on our broadcast. Someone complained that I was wearing a proper Springboks jersey because it had a Pro T on the other side. Hey, look, I'm not in charge of South African Rugby Union. I did make that decision to put the Pro T on there. Springboks are the Springboks. And if I had only, I'm not going to cut it off my jersey. But anyway, so I like this one. This is a very comfortable one. I love this one. This is one of the first ones I ever bought.
I sort of tell people, I don't know if they're all aware of it, but you do you call it color commentary, play-by-play commentary on your channel, where you watch the game and you sort of give a bit of a live commentary going along, sort of a watch-along. People must go to your channel, Rugby Ascendant, or the Rugby Ascendant. I'll put the links down in the description, and people can go watch the games with you. It's quite entertaining. I joined you there a couple of times. I like it.
Well, thanks. And I started doing it because people knew my love for rugby. And, I'm not fond of my voice, but a lot of people seem to like it on the radio and also on these things. I'm my own harshest critic, but I mean, when I recognize some really cool voices, listen, who's the guy? Hugh, the South African rugby. Yeah, Hugh Bladen, that guy. Of course, he always sounds like he's 3 sheets to the wind. I wonder what he's drinking in the booth. But Hugh Bladen, that's an iconic voice for calling rugby games. But some people like it, so it just started. There's a few people who were doing this sort of thing, the Kiwi Lads and Forever Sports, and others were doing it. So I started doing them own. It's gotten popular. It's taken a little while to get a following, but we had a really big week this past week. We surpassed 5,000 subscribers finally. And in addition to that, we also went over 1 million views on the channel. And then the final thing is we had our biggest ever watch along, if you want to call it that, because I do play-by-play and color commentary. And I'm not unbiased. I'm a Springbok fan. Anytime a South African team is playing, I'm all in. But this was a really exciting game. We had 38,000 people rocked up at some point. Now, to be fair, a lot of those people are simply looking for a free broadcast of somebody illegally playing the broadcast. Because a lot of people do that. They'll put the game on and YouTube doesn't catch it right away. They get away with it for 5 or 10 or 20 minutes, and then they have to create another channel. I don't do that because it's copyright violation, but I do the play-by-play and color commentary. There are a lot of South Africans who've told me that they put it on television, put the TV on mute, and listen to my color commentary and play-by-play because I get rather animated and excited in it. So, yeah, you can find that below the video. Check it out. Please become a subscriber. Really appreciate it. And for those who don't know, I spend a lot of my personal money for this sport. I travel the world. That's how MV and I linked up down there in Pretoria at Loftus. I actually added several $100s to the lost my trip because the Bulls won and their opponent wound up coming on the road instead of going up there to Ireland. We wound up having a game at Loftus, so I came back for a third game. But I fly to London to cover the sevens, to cover test matches over there. I was also at the Springboks A team when they went to Bristol. I covered that game. We used to go to Vegas for the sevens. So I travel all over, and I've covered URC, World Cup games in France, Japan, sevens, women's rugby, all over the world. I do it out of a love for the game, but it does cost me a lot of money, a lot of money.
I can imagine. Just tell me what's the difference between play-by-play and color commentary. I'm quite keen to hear that.
Okay, well, the play-by-play guy is the guy that's going something like this. So Pollard kicks it high into the air on the far side, and the Wallabies receiver catches on a high ball. Nice tackle. It's up there by my Pippi, but he breaks around. That's your play-by-play. Color commentary is, the Springboks haven't won here in Brisbane in 37,000 years, and this is an opportunity for them to win. We used to have Jan Serfontein on this team, but the powers that be hate him, and that's why we hate them. No.
Yeah. All right. It gives a bit of color. Yeah, I hear you. Okay.
Right. So that's the color commentary play. And in the broadcast booth, you always have two people. And like in American football, they usually have a third person and then a sideline person they go down for on the field stuff. In rugby, sometimes there's a sideline person down there. And at halftime, you get three because it's a good mix. But in the booth for rugby union, you typically have two people. And I play both those roles. So I try to anyway.
All right. Okay, let's talk about the Currie Cup. Like you said earlier in the conversation, it's only 3 rounds left. The Bulls are still on top. I think that at the moment they seem to be a bit of their own worst enemy. But before we go into the games, each of the games, tell me your thoughts about the tournament so far. Is it a success? Is it not? Is it delivering what we expected it to? Or is it more or less of what we thought it would be?
It's delivering exactly what I expected to deliver, Currie Cup to deliver. Games that are very exciting to watch. A lot of great comebacks, some unbelievable comebacks, some scintillating performances by players, a lot of young players that people weren't aware of who are now becoming household names to them. Very exciting stuff. At the same time, there also have been a few turgid, boring games we can't expect. You can't have every game be great. This past weekend was not a particularly exciting weekend. Probably, arguably, the most exciting or best contested game was the Cheetahs and Sharks in Bloemfontein. And the Cheetahs just blew that game at the end, which is unfortunate. But I think it's delivering exactly what we'd expect to see, a platform for up-and-coming players to develop skills, to get noticed, to achieve things. And also the exciting games, And I have to say that the attendance this week at Currie Cup games looked a lot better than I have seen it in recent weeks. And I think that's a consequence because the economy isn't better. People don't have more money in their pocket. They're just making a sacrifice, maybe not doing something else and going to the game instead. And to the fans that did that this past weekend, whether it was in Nelspruit or it was in Bloemfontein, thank you very much. From the bottom of my heart, it's important for people to rock up at the stadium and participate as part of the event. Otherwise, rugby dies, and we don't need rugby to die. South Africa is known for its rugby, and that's something we got to keep going. And the Currie Cup is a platform to keep that going. You go from varsity. A lot of those players aren't ready to make that leap from varsity to play for the URC or play abroad. So Currie Cup is great for it. I'm not saying it's a developmental league because I think we should put URC players down there as well. We saw Kitsoff is coming back from an injury. He played this weekend. And that's good to see. But I think it's delivering exactly what I expected it. A lot of people wanted to get rid of Currie Cup, and I think that's stupid. That's about as bright as getting rid of Newlands, which I think is one of the dumbest things ever. But that's all about money and grift and graft, and that's what's going on there. And yes, I said it. That's what it's all about. That's why Newlands is no longer the home of the province rugby union because of people's greed. That land is incredibly valuable. That spot can be developed for multi-luxury units or businesses, and that's what they want to do with it. In the meantime, they haven't got there. So I actually have been to Newlands and done a sad tour. I made a video put on TikTok with all the grass growing on the pitch as I panned around. But it's I think that the Currie Cup needs to stay. It's the oldest domestic rugby competition on the planet, and we should continue that. And I think this season has proven that beyond any shadow of a doubt. And anybody that's a doubter, hey, fine, go watch Bunnings NPC in New Zealand. I hope you enjoy it.
Well, I tell you what, I think they found the perfect spot for this tournament. In between the end of the URC, right in the middle of the international games, test windows, and then towards the start of the new URC season. And in the sense that a lot of players that couldn't play in the URC get an opportunity to put their names forward. A lot of the players like Steven Kitsoff coming back from injury might use this opportunity to play. So I think in terms of developing the depth of the squads, that helps a bit as well. So I think it's going to work well. I think it's actually the right spot now, like we talked about, and I think it's gonna start finding its feet again. It will never reach the heights that it did in the old days before the URC and the likes of Super Rugby, but at least it's still there. It's still going. But I want to talk about the Sharks specifically and the Cheetahs, because the Cheetahs were going along quite well. We lost against the Bulls, but they were right there with the Lions, second place.
Well, they drew even with the Bulls. They didn't lose. There's a draw.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. You're right. But then
but again, they choked away a victory.
That's my point.
They got an unnecessary scrum at midfield and lost a scrum, and boom, they kick it and they win.
No, they did lose against the Bulls at Loftus.
Oh yeah, but that was earlier. I'm talking about the most recent one.
Yeah, and I'm talking about the fact that they lose one game and now suddenly they're back in third place and they're slipping back. And the home semi is now suddenly seeming to be a little bit difficult to attain. Like you said, they threw this game away and they've now jeopardized their tournament.
Well, I think they've thrown away 2 games, and both at home. They threw this game away with the line break that never should have happened. That defensive letdown never should have happened after they just scored late in the game. And they won against the Bulls. I mean, again, I think it was a knock on or something, but near midfield, just over the midfield line, and they got a scrum. Their scrum had been in trouble in this game against the Bulls. The Bulls win a scrum penalty, they kick it, and they get a draw. That never should have happened. The ball should have been kicked down the pitch, and put the Bulls back under pressure because there wasn't much time left on the clock. So they squandered that. That should have been a draw. That would have been a loss for the Bulls and would have put them in first place. And then this game here, but so now they're 4 wins, 2 losses, and a draw. They're still in the mix, but they may not get a home semifinal depending on what happens the rest of the way.
And the Sharks, they've had a good run now. 3 wins, 1 draw. They seem to be finding their feet a bit.
Yeah, where did they come from? The Sharks, it's kind of like winning the Challenge Cup. Where did that come from? After such an abysmal URC season, they won the Challenge Cup, which is incredibly exciting. I was through the roof. I was excited. Not because I'm a Sharks fan, but because they're South Africans and they won it. But it also proves the concept that South African squads in the Challenge Champions Cup are a good idea. But the Sharks have come from nowhere, from death's door. They were winless, 0-3. The season was over. Now they're knocking on the door. I mean, the Sharks are just 3 points behind the Cheetahs, but they're in playoff position. With 3 weeks left, it's theirs to lose. The Pumas, because they don't have enough bonus points, are trailing. The Pumas were at the top of the log for a fair portion of the season. Now, 70% through the season, they find themselves on the outside looking in at the same record as the Sharks: 3 wins, 3 losses, and 1 draw. And their draw also was one that shouldn't have happened. But it was a heck of a effort to get that draw. That was against but that was, the Sharks are looking good and they're in playoff position. They'll go on the road, but right now they're in a playoff position for the semifinal.
Well, let's talk about the Bulls. You and I were both in the press conference after struggling to get there, but yeah, we were there. Your thoughts on that? 26-0 up and then 26-24 the next moment. They almost let that one slip against Jimmy Stonehouse in Nelspruit.
Yeah, once again, we've had this conversation, 2 or 3 weeks in a row about the Bulls' defense becoming suspect at inopportune times. That was a heck of a game. I mean, I was like, wow. But the Bulls managed to pull it back together in the end, and the Pumas let it slip away from them. And I think that's what happened. I don't think the Bulls were better at the end. I think the Pumas let it slip away from them with sloppy defense and poor defense. The Bulls were in trouble there. They almost gave this thing away. They're lucky, I would say. And this is the one concern. I would measure or mark this Bulls team as similar to the Cheetahs team from 2 years ago when we had the final between the Pumas and Griquas up in Kimberley. And the reason we had a final in Kimberley is because the Cheetahs were winning big at home in Bloemfontein in the semifinal, and then the Pumas came out of nowhere. They just blitzed them and won that game. What I'm saying here is that Bulls are in a similar position. They could be in a semifinal and look like they're going to win this thing at Loftus, and if somebody comes back, whether right now it would be the Sharks or the Cheetahs, and just takes them out, and they blow it. So I worry a little bit about the Bulls. If I was a Bulls fan, I wouldn't be cocky. I would not be cocky. You got to win this thing.
Interesting that P.W. said in that press conference, remember, he said he's going to start losing players to the URC squad now from this week onwards. That's an interesting conundrum. I thought it was going to be the other way around. Are they going to pull in URC players? He seems to be having to let URC players go. And then, I don't know who's going to end up playing, because I can think of a lot of names that will be in the URC squad playing in this Currie Cup squad as it is.
Absolutely. And if that's the case, we'll get to the semifinals and we'll see a tier 3 team from the Bulls, and they will get slaughtered.
Yeah, that's not a good thing. All right, the Lions.
And they'll get slaughtered at Loftus, which is even worse.
Don't say that. Gives me goosebumps. I can't. It's dramatic. I don't want to hear that. The Lions dismantled Province at Ellis Park with Steven Kitshoff and all in the team. This Lions team seems to be firing on all cylinders. Renzo du Plessis seems to be a name to watch out for as well.
I'm sorry. Which game? I don't have any recollection of this game.
And you're also suffering from trauma.
I'm suffering from trauma, but hey, listen. At least I got that Super Brew pick correct. I picked the Lions.
Don't say it out loud, man.
I did pick the Lions. Well, we've had this conversation. My Province side is inconsistent. They're just unreliable this season. That said, they're not out of the playoffs. They have a chance to still get there. I mean, and actually, we'll get to it here shortly. But of the teams that are fighting for third and fourth place, as 4 teams, I say Province, the Sharks, the Cheetahs, and Pumas, all fighting for that position. The Province are in the worst position with just 14 points, but they're still in the mix. They could get to the playoffs. They're not going to get a 1 or 2 seed, but they can get there. And they have the easiest schedule, in my view. And we'll talk about that shortly. But it's Renzo du Plessis. Yeah, that's a name to watch. That guy was very impressive. And that's not the only time he's been impressive. I've seen him perform very well throughout the season. So, the Lions are looking good, but they were suspect early season. But again, it doesn't matter what you do the first 3 or 4 weeks of a season, as long as you don't fall too far behind. As long as you get in the playoffs, a hot team in the playoffs makes all the difference. And the Lions are hitting on all cylinders at the moment. They look really good. They look better than the Bulls, more consistent.
And then Sunday we had the Snorfest. Griquas versus Griffins. I mean, they scored 8 tries, but I mean, it was probably the most boring match I watched all year. Nine tries. It's ridiculous.
Well, I thought you were going to flame me because I went out on a flyer and picked the Griffins to win this game.
You're not the only one. I'll tell you that.
Well, that was one of my Super Brew fails. No, look, the Griffins, you just couldn't help but shed a tear for them. It was painful. It was painful to watch. It really was painful to watch. I mean, frankly, the Griquas could have scored 100 points in this game if they really put their mind to it. The Griffins just can't get out of their own way. Their scrum is atrocious. Their lineouts are terrible. The breakdown work is suspect. There's in this game there wasn't much. Nothing went right in this game. The guys we thought had some good talent, they were impressive, like Coda and Ver, were not impressive in this game. Chadley Wen was constantly looking at the official going, what you talking about, Willis? Because he's the captain. But the Griffins were just sad. There's a lot of reasons for that. The Grick was excited they won, but their season's over. So, they're not going to get much out of this. They might win a game after this, but they're not going to get into the playoffs. So this season's a wash for those 2 teams. But yeah, it was a Snorfest. But thanks to the people who rocked up. I had a decent audience for a Griffins game on a Sunday. I was impressed how many people showed. In the end, we went well over 1,000 viewers, which for that game on a Sunday is a shocker. I think that hopefully that's a testament that people are enjoying my play-by-play color commentary, or maybe they were just bored. I don't know, but thanks for everybody showing up.
Just one thing about this tournament that I think is very evident, and that's the fact that the smaller unions don't have the depth and they don't have the talent that the other bigger ones do, and they are starting to fall back now. The Pumas, the Griquas, the Griffins, all starting to fall back. Unfortunately, I have to include Province now in that little also-ran category. Because they're clearly not serious about this competition. I mean, you don't pick guys that played for Paul Roos last year still to play against, experienced guys like Aranos Kutsia and the likes, for the Free State. I think that's making a mistake by blooding these players too young in this kind of environment. That's a Province approach I don't agree with.
I'm 100% with you, and I would compliment the Bulls. They picked a quality coach who was unknown for the most part, and he's taking it seriously. Whether they fail in the end, we'll see. But their season's been impressive thus far, even though their defense is a bit suspect. I would say the Lions have done the same thing. The Sharks, I'm not really sure what to say about them because they put experienced players in there and they lost 3 games early in the season.
They put Springboks in there, yeah.
I know. And then they backed out and took a lot of the experienced players out. And now they're performing better. So I really don't know what to say about the Sharks. But yeah, Province has really kind of pissed this season away. I think you've hit that on the head. And let's go back to 2 years ago when the Griquas and the Griffins, or not the Griffins, the Griquas and the Pumas got into a final, which was like unprecedented. I mean, the Griquas haven't won the Currie Cup since 1970, and the Pumas had never won it until then. They'd never even been in a final, and they got there with an unbelievable come-from-behind victory against the Cheetahs and Bloemfontein. The reason that season happened the way it did, in my view, and I said so at the time because I'm being honest, is that the rest of the union was putting their best players to get the best foot forward in URC, and the seasons conflicted. And so that gave the Griquas. Not trying to knock them down because I love the Griquas. I love the teal, the peacock, the Griquas and the Pumas a chance to go to a final win it. We're not going to see that if these teams take the approach you're taking now. They won't be back because they don't have the money. They don't have the backing. They don't have the resources. The best they can hope for is to be an average team, a middle team, and maybe occasionally they'll get a good season. And that's unfortunate. I think that the bigger unions, there's nothing wrong. I remember when Devin Williams first came up to the Bulls and they said he was on loan from the Pumas. Like, why would the Pumas loan him to the Bulls for the URC? Now he's still there. He's still there. So that doesn't look like a loan to me. It looks like he's now part of the Bulls. But there's nothing wrong with these bigger unions loaning out some of their players to teams like the Griquas and the Pumas, maybe the Griffins as well. That would be healthy, I think, for the Currie Cup going forward.
You were talking about the running towards the end of the tournament. Who's got the easier run? Who's got the more difficult run? Just talk to us about that a bit.
Sure. And then I'll talk about the games. I think that you can't really predict which game's going to matter, but I've got a list of games I think will matter in the last 3 weeks. All right. So of the 4 teams that are competing for third and fourth position, because the top 4 teams go in to the semifinal. So they basically make the playoffs. Half the teams in the competition make the playoffs. Of the 4 teams, I think that Western Province has the easiest remaining schedule. They play the Sharks at home. It's not necessarily going to be easy. They play the Pumas at home. That's an advantage. And then they play the Griquas on the road. So that's not a particularly difficult schedule. The Pumas and Sharks can pip them, but they are at home. That gives them an advantage that usually plays off them. The Sharks, but they only have 14 points in the log. So 3 bonus point wins would give them 29. And that would definitely probably get them in. Now, the Sharks have 21 points right now. They play Province on the road. Not an easy one because they're on the road. They play the Griffins at home, but then they play the Bulls at home the last game. And we don't know how that's going to be. It's tough to predict because it might not be frontline players. It might not be the players playing now because it's URC. So I think that's still of the choices. The Cheetahs have a challenge. They've got to play the Lions at Ellis Park this weekend. They play the Griquas on the road. Not a problem. And they play the Pumas on the road. The only reason I say it's harder is because they've got 2 games on the road. And then the Pumas, I think, have the toughest road to hoe. And they're currently at it with 19 points. They trail the Sharks in 5th place. They have the Griffins on the road. That's a win. They play Province on the road. That's tough. And then they play the Cheetahs at home. That's going to be tough too. So I think the Western Province, the Sharks, Cheetahs, and Pumas in that order have the easiest to most difficult schedules remaining. Again, there's a lot of things that can affect this. I'm just looking at, what we've had so far, what could be. As far as games to look for this weekend, it's the Cheetahs Lions. That should be the premier matchup this weekend. And that game is in Bloemfontein. So if I'm correct, is it Bloemfontein? Yeah.
Just why the Cheetahs are playing the Lions in Bloemfontein this weekend, not at
Yeah. No, it's in Bloemfontein. So that's this weekend. And then on the 30th of August, and then we've got Province and the Sharks. That matters because if Province doesn't win, they're done. They've got to beat the Sharks. If the Sharks win, it strengthens their position. So that's a critical. So those 2 games this weekend, Cheetahs, Lions, Sharks, and Province. That's in Western Province. And on the 30th, it's the Griquas versus Cheetahs, and that'll be important because of the Cheetahs' failure to win this past weekend. They've got to win that game. That's why it'll be important, but it may not be that interesting. The Bulls versus the Lions will be the premier marquee matchup that weekend. Bulls versus Lions. And then on the 1st of September, we've got Province versus the Pumas. That's not a premier matchup, but that's a death matchup for both teams. Both teams have to win that game.
Just one thing about that Bulls-Lions game. I don't know if you saw, but that game is not going to be played at Loftus. It's going to be played at Midstream College because there's a pop concert at Loftus on that Saturday.
Where's that at? I don't know that. Where's that stadium at?
Midstream College, like a school field.
Why don't they go to Tuck? Why don't they play Tucks? It's right down the street.
I don't know why. I'm just saying, I just know they're not going to play at Loftus because they're preparing for a big music festival or something at Loftus that Saturday. So the game is on the Friday, and it will be at Midstream College, which is in between Joburg and Pretoria in Centurion.
Well, maybe the reason we're not going to Tucks is because parking is an absolute disaster going to Tucks.
Probably.
I've been to Tucks for a game. My God, I had to park 7 kilometers away. I might as well stay in my hotel. But I don't know. It's that's interesting. So thanks on that one. Then, as I was saying, Province versus the Pumas on the 1st of September. It's not a marquee matchup, but it's a death. I mean, both those teams could still be in it, and a loss there will put them out of it. And then the last weekend, we've got the Pumas versus Cheetahs because the Pumas have to win again, and the Pumas and the Cheetahs have to win as well. And then the last game that's probably of note here would be important for placement, and depends what happens next couple weeks, is the Sharks versus the Bulls at Kings Park in Durban.
Big one.
Yeah, I think so.
It's also big because these USC starts
Right.
that last weekend. So that's going to be Bulls versus Stormers in Cape Town, and then the Sharks versus Lions in Durban. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes towards the end of this Currie Cup, how the players are shaping up, who's falling out, who's coming back. A lot of things to play for. It's interesting.
Well, I've got the Sharks listed as playing the Bulls on the 8th, if that's correct. Let me double check on that. But it'll be important. Let me see. Where's the 8th at? Yeah, I've got the 8th is September. I've got Sharks hosting the Bulls, and that will likely be a Bull squad that's probably weakened because of the URC.
That's what I'm saying.
So I mean, that could go any way, and it could be huge down at Kings Park. Anyway, there you have it. So that's the Currie Cup. I think the Currie Cup is living up to what I expected to be, and it's a tournament I'll continue to support. I think South Africans should do the same.
All right. Thanks, Chris. It was nice as always. I enjoyed that. It's always nice to talk to you. It's always interesting to hear the view from across the pond, if I can call it that. So we'll talk again next week. Appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks a lot. Cheers. Catch you later.
Bye.
This is the Rugby Ascendant podcast with Envia Velman and Chris Wyatt.